Well, it's a really difficult day for those people that knew Graham Thorpe well, and everybody listening. I'm sure people turned up at Old Trafford today will have watched Graham bat over the years and really enjoyed what he contributed. A wonderful player for England. 100 Test matches, 82 one-day internationals. He played 341 first-class matches. He died tragically at the start of August. Difficult time for you, Toughness, as a friend of his.
Yes, a dear friend, Graham. We did a lot of touring together, played a lot of cricket together for England, ups and downs on long tours away from home, and you become very, very firm friends. And that has been, it's an absolute tragedy really. Wonderful player, fantastic bloke, great sense of humour, and so many, it's affected a lot of people in the cricket family. A very well loved guy, and so it's just a tragic event. And my condolences go out to friends and family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't know Graham as well. I did play against him a couple of times, I think, but I watched him, and you watched him in the middle batting, and you thought, this is a man who's in control out there, absolute control. He played so many contrasting innings for England, brilliant innings. He would play the situation. He had the reputation of being a man for a crisis. He'd respond well to a crisis. He had a great record against Australia, which was the real litmus test of how good you are.
Well, what's happening here, the two teams have come out early and they've lined up on the outfield, and there's going to be a minute's applause in a couple of minutes' time. At the moment, the players and spectators are watching a 2-minute video of Graham Thorpe's cricketing career. Just see him being hugged in the middle. He plays so many tremendous innings. One innings I remember, particularly at Bridgetown in Barbados against West Indies, where he scored 100 out of 200. It was just fantastic, and no one else could come to terms with the West Indies attack that day, and he was a magnificent player. And of course he was a colleague for some of us in the Test match special box as well. I remember the last time I spoke to him was before the Sydney Test match, and he was actually the England coach. I remember Chris Silverwood had COVID, and Graham Thorpe led the team into that Sydney Test match in the last Ashes series. So it was so hard, I think, for everybody hearing that news at the start of
I played in
August.
that game when he booted the ball for 4.
Just remind us of the circumstances.
It was at Perth. He dropped one at second slip, but he was a good footballer, Thorpe, and he took a great big swing at it, not expecting to connect, and booted it straight past me, and I was at cover point, which was even more surprising.
You didn't dive after it.
What you done? You booted it, you scored a goal at Perth. He was a great player. He had great determination, and
I remember he scored 1 century for England, 1 boundary, but you played probably at Christchurch, where he got 100 in a big partnership with Flintoff, 18 boundaries in
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely, and that famous innings, of course, that he played against Pakistan as well, wasn't it? In the dark, total dark. He'll be hugely missed.
Well, the video on the big screen has come to an end, and the minute's applause is starting now, so we'll just pause for that. The Old Trafford crowd standing up and acknowledging the career and life of one of England's top players, a player who played 100 Test matches.
Now here comes Julian again, left arm over the wicket. And this ball is a short one that's pulled away, or in fact it was hit in the air. Now it's going to bounce over Slater's head, and that's his 100. Unbelievable way to get it. It was in the air. Slater thought he had a chance of catching it. He moved and then stopped, realising that he wouldn't. It bounced straight over his head, and Thorpe has made 100 in his first test. 101. What a great way to start a test career. And let's let the crowd tell you the tale.
And Thorpe takes a short single on the offside, and he's got his 100. His first 100 in Australia, his second test 100. He is celebrating before he completes the runs. A quick dab away on the offside. He gets the run that takes him to 100. I'm sure that's a very big moment for English cricket, certainly a big moment for Graham Thorpe.
So Morrison is on his way. Thorpe has 97. He drives through the offside. That'll be it. A great roar from the Barmy Army, who stand and applaud Graham Thorpe, who is absolutely thrilled. He's waving his bat. He gestured there to the England dressing room. He's pulled off his helmet. And a bit of a hug there from Dominic Cork, his partner. All around the ground, people rise to Graham Thorpe, who's had a battle.
And still it is in, both Thorpe turns that round the corner, and there it is, that's his 200. It goes down to fine leg, and Drum the fielder there. Thorpe waves his bat, he looks like a sort of animated, I don't quite know what, takes off his crash helmet, waves his bat, his hands, his crash helmet. The England dressing room cheer, the stand at the far end cheers to Dad's army, or rather the Barmy Army, and Hussain has clapped his hands and brought them in.
Kaiser Abbas comes in to bowl to Thorpe, who is 97. Left arm over the wicket, bowls to Thorpe, who leans into an on drive. It's going all the way down to the long on boundary. It may pull up just short. It's been caught up just yards inside the boundary, but Thorpe is back for his third run. That takes him to his 100, a well-earned 100 for Graham Thorpe, and what a splendid rescue act he's played for England.
In comes Sacklin now and bowls to Thorpe. Thorpe goes back, and those are the winning runs. They've crossed for a single, they're back for the second. Graham Thorpe has won. England have won for the first time in Pakistan since Ted Dexter's side won here in 1961-62. And England have won with 2 overs and 3 balls to spare.
Thorpe batting alongside Nasser Hussain at the end in the dark in Karachi, and it was dark. And I've been speaking to Nasser about his memories of Graham and that match in Pakistan.
He was seeing them better than I was. I think he said after, actually, when someone asked him about my innings, he said something like, well, Nasser had been batting in the dark for the last year anyway. So, and I think he said that to me as I arrived at the crease. I just remember how composed he was. That winter was incredible, actually. Graham, the way he batted that whole winter, from whether it be Sri Lanka, Pakistan, wherever, his playing of spin and his meticulous attention to detail, and the way he played some of the great spinners on some real spinning pitches, the way he played Murali in the Sri Lanka series, and the way he batted in Karachi, he just timed that innings perfectly. He was someone that was always up for that sort of innings. He loved the battle. He loved, he loved the fact that the light was closing in. He loved, Moeen was having a go at him at one stage. Steve Buckner stepped in and said, Moeen, you're going to finish this innings. Whatever happens, we're not going off for light. I could not think of a better player. Maybe Atherton. Ath had that sort of character about him as well, if you go to Johannesburg or whatever. But in that sort of situation, someone who was up for a fight, Thorpe was always up for that sort of battle.
Yeah. Was he a hard practicer? I mean, you talk about playing Murali and so on. Was that as a result of hours spent in the nets?
Not just a hard practicer. He was someone at attention to detail. So when we arrived in Sri Lanka, he went straight in the nets with spikes on and scuffed up areas that he knew Murali would be landing, obviously a little bit wider because he spun it so much. But he wanted to make practice as hard as possible, almost exaggerated practice, because he knew us facing our own spinners was going to be nothing in preparation for facing Murali. So he went into the net, scuffed it up, him and Trez, I think it was, and made sure that we would get difficult practice so that almost when we went into a match situation, it would feel that little bit easier. So he was very fit, supremely fit to play those innings that he did in that heat and humidity that winter. The work he'd done running up hills. He used to love running up sand dunes in Surrey or whatever it was. His fitness came from football. He played a lot of football in his youth, but he was very fit, and he was just a quality player. He could get you the slowest 100 in Lahore, where he got one boundary in his 100. He got one after getting 100, and then he could go, Christchurch or whatever, and get double 100 in 230 deliveries. It just showed that he could play the situation so well.
Yeah. And you two are linked, aren't you? Really, there's so many innings together. Birmingham against Australia, that famous partnership.
Yeah, I was thinking back on it the other day, and I was at the other end on his Test debut, and I was at the other end when he got to 100. Obviously the Edgbaston when he got 138 and I got a double. And it's not just that, winning and beating that great Australian side, having just beaten them in the one-dayers. For like a couple of weeks we felt like we can beat Australia here. This is good fun, batting against Warne and McGrath, Gillespie and batting with your best mate at the other end, walking off in Karachi, like you've mentioned, walking off my last Test innings, who happened to be there. And my last Test innings was Thorpe at the other end. I think the reason for that was, I think we both felt very comfortable with each other. Myself in particular, I was quite a complicated cricketer, batter. I had so many things going on in my head. I was a worrier. And whether it be off the field in his room, playing with our bat handles and our bats, or on the field when I arrived at the crease or he arrived at the crease, you just felt so comfortable. That Strauss run out is an example of that. I just run Strauss out second innings, Lord, the local lad who was going to get 200s in the game on debut. And I was down, really down, upset. And Thorpe arrived and he sensed I was upset and he just went, Nas, get over yourself. He gave me a right rollicking. Get over yourself, mate. There's a Test match to win here. And that pretty much summed him up, really. He was a real tough nut that at times he'd put his arm around you, as captain when I used to knock on his door and we used to share a glass of red or something and we'd sit there chatting. He'd put his arm around you and tell you the good things you were doing, but at times he would tell you, come on, get over yourself. And he was very good at putting things back then, very good at putting things into perspective.
Yeah, and yet obviously serious issues behind the scenes in his personal life. I mean, it's difficult to put those two things together because, like you, a lot of people talked about how that real organised side and how he had his mind so well focused on cricket, and yet there was clearly issues away from that.
Yeah, and he struggled with off the field stuff. What I say with that is that you'd play with Atherton or Stewart and Ath had a bad back and there was various things going on off the field that they would turn up and they would cope very well with. Graham actually, if there was anything not quite right away from cricket, you had to let him go. Whether it be his back, he suffered from real back problems, and if he was slightly under par with his back, you knew he wouldn't be there for you, or obviously his family life and issues that were going on away from cricket. He rang me up on a couple of times and just said, look, I'm sorry, I don't feel I can go on this tour or whatever. So, listen, I played with him in good times and bad. It just shows mental health, mental illness. Here is one of the toughest cricketers I ever played with. And for him to go through what he did in the end just shows that it's an illness, really. Stuff about man up and get over it and all that sort of stuff. Graham Thorpe was one of the toughest I ever played with, and he struggled towards the end. So it's all very, very sad, Eggers. But I will remember the good times that we shared together, and it's not just cricketing times. Like I say, those times in his room that we were together, chatting away. He was a really good company. Never said anything in team meetings. Never said a word in team meetings. But yet, when you wanted to have a proper chat about cricket and life and whatever, he was always there for you. And I think what endeared him most to the British public and fans and cricket fans was his toughness, his tough runs. We were often 30 for 2 at best in that era. And he would walk out there with that feeler headband on and that Kookaburra bubble bat and the 3/4 length sleeves that he loved to wear. And he showed how important it was, how much character he had. I think Goffey said to me, and I asked Goffey, what do you look for in a teammate? And he said, he pointed over to Thorpe, or looked over to Thorpe and said, just look at that little man in the corner. When we push him out of that door at 30 for 2, you know he's up for a fight and a battle. When you're talking about some of the great bowlers, you're talking about McGrath and Warren, Wasim, Wackart, Donald, Pollock. You go through some great fast bowlers and spinners, Murali, whoever you want to talk about, Saki and Mushtaq Ahmed, all of them, Wackart, Wasim. You're pushing him out the door against some of the toughest bowlers in a tough situation where England were up against it yet again. And Thorpe would invariably deliver. And the stats tell you they average 45 in 100 Test matches. That is a remarkable achievement.
Nasser Hussain, and we'll hear from more of Thorpe's former teammates in a few minutes. But first, let's go right back. I've been speaking to Thorpe's former PE teacher, Simon Sherborne, who gave him his first opportunity for representative cricket with Surrey.
Well, he arrived at Weydon School, where I'd been a PE teacher for about 4 years, and I was determined to give any promising youngster the opportunity to play representative sport, as I had done with Surrey Schools cricket. So, yeah, he was an 11-year-old. This would have been 1980, and he announced himself as confident that he would play for England.
I mean, he really sort of meant it, did he?
Absolutely, and he was absolutely convinced that that's what he would do, but he was unsure which sport, so he was keeping various options open, including football, and as we know, he went on to get offers of professional football at a couple of clubs and play England schools football. So he was a prodigious talent. And it was
following two older brothers too, which actually is often not an easy thing to do.
Well, it's not, but if you've got the level of ability that he had, and you've got those brothers wanting to play football and cricket with you all the time, and for example, he lived very close to Recklesham Cricket Club, where he played his first village cricket. But he lived he had a back garden that was very long and thin, and they used to play cricket all summer evenings. And that's when he decided that being a left-hander was better than being a right-hander because of the configuration of his garden. And so he actually changed from being a natural right-hander to becoming a left-hander because he could see that was the way to go. And his development at school was just brilliant to follow and support and push. But of course, it went alongside the work that the village clubs were doing. His mum and dad were both involved at Recklesham Cricket Club, and he played in that league, the Ianson League, at 13 and scored 100 in his first year. So he was clearly a talent very early on, and brimming with self-confidence. That was the thing that was fantastic to watch and see. And it's just such a sadness that self-confidence clearly failed him in later years.
Yeah. When you first saw him, bat, you could see there was something special.
You could, but because my job was actually to teach him how to bat, and I can remember in the gym having arguments about his back lift, because he thought the way I was teaching it wasn't exactly the way he wanted to do it. He was very clear in his own mind about how he wanted to play, but by and large, he was brilliant to work with, because that level of talent and commitment is brilliant for any PE teacher to watch and support. And as any PE teacher will tell you, most brilliant youngsters sort of normally get caught up by their peers after, a year or so. They're just a year ahead of themselves. But he never was. He just kept going, and every opportunity he got, he delivered all the way through to Test cricket. As we know, he scored 100 in his debut at Trent Bridge, which is just brilliant.
He to use the word rebellious streak would be over egging it, but he was his own man, Graham. Now, was that evident when he was a child as well?
Well, it was indeed. He was always clear in his own mind how he wanted to go about things, but he and I fell out a little when he was 16, because he got the opportunity, which I thought was the opportunity of a lifetime. Surrey Schools cricket were touring Australia, Now, if I tell you the manager was Mickey Stewart and the coach was Jeff Arnold and Arthur McIntyre was also on the staff, we're talking about icons of cricket that wanted him to go to Australia, and he turned them down.
Right.
As a 16-year-old. And I said, what are you doing, Graham? Because this is your big moment. You do not turn these sorts of people down. You know, these people, this is your opportunity. And he was determined. He said, no, I'm going to be making the numbers up. I shall be batting middle to late order. And I don't want to do that. He said, they'll go in 2 years' time, and I'll go then, and I'll top the averages. So he was so determined to, plough his own furrow and in 2 years' time, he was called up for Surrey. So he knew where he was going, and he was exactly right. So that gives you an idea of just how determined he was, and it was excellent to see him being proved right. And
yes. And of course, he was actually picked as an all-rounder, wasn't he? I mean, initially for Surrey, I mean, he could bowl too. He
could, and it was only his bad back that sort of really prevented him from doing more of that. He suffered with a bad back and sort of cut the bowling out. But yes, he was absolutely an all-rounder.
If you had to put, into a sentence, your thoughts, your memories, what really stands out for you about Graham Thorpe? Well, what would it be?
Well, it was his prodigious talent and the self-confidence he had to fulfill his ambition. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and his focus was terrific. And that led him to be seen as a little bit sort of arrogant at times, but he was never loud. He didn't like speaking an awful lot. He had a little bit of a lisp, and so he didn't, he wasn't boastful at all, but he was absolutely determined. And the way he batted for England in the early days when England was really struggling sort of exemplified his attitude. He was tough and determined, and he was a joy to work with at school, and a joy to follow in his career.
That's Simon Sherborne, who helped Thorpe into the Surrey systems. Let's speak to one of Thorpe's Surrey and England teammates, Mark Ramprakash, now, who joins us on the line. Mark, thank you for joining us to talk about, obviously, something extremely difficult and personal for you. But you and Graham Thorpe go right back, don't you? Under 12s?
Yes, that's right. Yes, afternoon, Aggers. Very fond memories of playing against Graham for Middlesex v Surrey under 12s, and we sort of continued to play against each other throughout our teenage years. We probably became a bit more closer, for England under 19s. We played a lot with England Lions, and then of course in the full side. So got to know him very well. We were only a month apart in terms of birthdays, but that took him into the year above me at school. He was a keen footballer, so we both shared a love of football, so we had things in common. And so yes, we actually coached together as well. He was very instrumental in terms of me going on to become a coach after my career, and worked very closely with him.
Yeah, we were hearing from his teacher there, Mark, about how very driven he was as a youngster, determined to make the grade. Was that how you remember him playing through that system as youngsters?
Well, I do remember that he was originally an all-rounder. I think he opened the bowling for the Surrey age groups with perhaps Martin Bignor at the other end, I think it was.
David Gow was his first-class wicket.
Well, that's quite something.
His debut.
Because he was a fine player. But I think he was sort of batting more mid to lower order and a bit of an all-rounder. I think what marked Graham out was when he got up to 18, 19, 20 and experienced some first-class cricket, I think he was very smart. And you look at the best players that I've come across, and they learn quickly. They take on information quickly and then use it. Graham realised what he had to become really good at if he was going to reach the top level, not just reach it, but be very successful. And he worked very, very hard on his back foot game. I mean, if anyone remembers his best innings, throughout the 90s in particular, it was full of swashbuckling pull shots, cut shots, And he was also a very adept player of quality spin bowling. And those two things he worked very, very hard on and became brilliant at in those two disciplines, which really held him in very good stead for his international career.
I was looking at a lovely photograph of him giving you a big hug in Barbados when he got your first yes. Test century. That must be a very special moment. What was he like? What was he like to bat with?
Yes, well, without doubt, one of my favourite people to bat with, because he was in control. He, would often, one of the few English players to sort of take on the quicks, and you sort of felt confident at the other end. But he was also very adept at getting singles, rotating the strike. I'm sure I've got a lot of freebies because of the left hand, right hand combination. And he was someone who was at the crease focused, but had a good sense of humour as well at the right time. And so that really helped settle me down. So without doubt, one of the favourite people that I remember batting with. And I can remember innings, yes, at Barbados, and let's not forget, in that innings, he actually had to go off the field for a back spasm. And he came back and still got 100, which was a monumental effort. I was with him. I remember being at the other end and keeping him company for a little while in Perth when we saw Glenn McGrath in his early days on a quick bouncy one at Perth, and also Shane Warne played in that game. I mean, Graham played, he's got a stellar record, and he played throughout the 90s, which was an era rich in Test cricket. We saw West Indies were still world champions. I've just mentioned about Warne and McGrath, how they came through. South Africa's re-emergence with a terrific pace attack. And so Graham's record throughout the 90s, he is truly one of the great players of that era.
Did you know, Mark, it might be a difficult question, but did you know that there were issues behind the scenes? And do you think that he would have been better looked after in this era?
Well, we all knew of the terrible divorce he went through. And I don't think he ever truly got over that. His first marriage ended very, very badly. He was not allowed to see his children for long periods, and as a result, never managed to have a relationship with them. I don't think he truly got over that. And you were pretty much left on your own to just get on with it. So we didn't have perhaps the support, the level of support and expertise available nowadays. I heard the interview that you did earlier. Graham was his own man.
Yes.
But sometimes being a bit introverted, you can keep things close to your chest and maybe not share them and look for help. But I think that was a very traumatic time in his life. Of course, he came back. He also had fitness problems with his back throughout his career. He still continued to play. And I think in a way, I saw a different Graham when he became a coach. Because he was in a wonderful position. Not many players can be a great player, but also a great coach. And he was a great coach. Spent a huge amount of time with the young Ben Stokes and Joe Root and Joss Butler and all the rest of them. Very, very good at communicating, very likeable, challenged the players, but did it in a nice way. As a result, he was very, very much, liked as a coach. And I think he was able to come out of himself a little bit more as a coach. We saw a different side of Graham. But as I say, I think that those early experiences in the 90s with the breakdown of his marriage, I'm afraid I don't think he ever really got over that. And then, of course, other issues came along later on in life.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much indeed for paying tribute to your friend. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Right, Mark Ramprakash at lunch here at Old Trafford. 80-5 is the score, and we've got about 10 minutes to chat along still as we pay tribute to Graham Thorpe. I've got Michael Vaughan alongside me, Thorpe's former captain, of course, Phil Tufnell. Played a lot with Graham for England, and Alistair Cook, who was coached and inspired by Graham. It's terribly moving, isn't it? I mean, all of these tributes, Nasser and Mark, and talking about it, it's sort of... I mean, tough as that clearly takes you back to times in your hotel rooms together on tours away and trying to jolly each other along a bit.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of fun. I mean, so much fun we had, you know what I mean? There were long tours in those days and you were away from home and you had to bond and form friendships very, very quickly. You know, otherwise it was just tough, hard work. You know, we were usually 2 or 3 test matches down pretty early on and you're a long way from home. So you had to, you know, really look around the dressing room and look to your mates to pull you through those tough times. And that's what exactly we did. Interesting listening there, you know, about sort of keeping things bottled up inside.
Yes.
He did, but I think in those times, I think you had to a little bit. You know what I mean? If you said you weren't playing spin very well, there'd be someone going, oh, well, he can't play spin, he won't get picked for the next test match. You know what I mean? You always had to have this kind of steely kind of sort of persona. Otherwise, you know, people would sort of like see it as a weakness. And I think that's now what's changed a lot.
You think it has? Because you could be up and down. I mean, everyone's up and down. But, you know, you had your moments.
Absolutely.
Do you think that the structure was in place then in those days to, like, help Graham?
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't necessarily think that it had even been thought about. To be honest with you, I mean, I can remember when I had a do or two, you know what I mean? I actually got fined, you know, for sort of like having a little bit of a wobble in Perth and what have you. And it literally was, oh, well, you know what I mean? I don't think he can come on tour again. You know what I mean? And so you never ever opened yourself up to anyone, you know, and the answer was, I'm afraid, roll your sleeves up, young man.
Yeah.
Which in a funny sort of way, sometimes, you know, can work, because I had to sort of shake myself out of it a little bit and do that, but it doesn't work for everyone.
No. Michael, I was looking up that Graham had played 57 tests.
Some playing as well. Sorry to interrupt. Some player.
Yeah, of course.
Really?
Yeah. He played 57 by the time you came in, so he was a very established member of the England side when you arrived.
Yeah, I mean, I always, you know, going into that England side, I think there's lots of stories that, you know, new players weren't welcomed. Absolutely, I was welcomed, you know, from all the senior players, but there was something about Thorpe that, you know, he had a great mindset. As Phil's just said, he was a great player. So you kind of align yourself with the great players, and I used to watch him practice, but he had a really nice manner about the way that he played. As soon as he went over the white line, his eyes went, and he was like, right, here we go. We're playing competitive cricket. As soon as he came back into the dressing room, back in the hotel, having a drink at night, it was always a little bit cheeky, always lots of fun, great humour, and great for advice. You know, you get a naught and you feel so down. You know, Test cricket is horrible, it's hard, you're lonely. You're in your room, you'd come on, downstairs. Let's have a chat. Go and have a chat, and you just say, look, you've got another chance. You know, you can't do anything about what you've just done. You've got a, you know, second innings, you can go again. So he was always giving you that great message. And I always remember in 2003, I got the one-day captaincy, and then I got the Test captaincy, and you know, I take over, and there's Nasser Hussain, Alex Stewart, Darren Goff, some senior guys there, and I'm a young kid really captaining the team. And he liked what I was trying to do, and he came and knocked on my door, and he said, Skipper, he said, I'm going to back you 100%. He said, I know what you're trying to achieve. We want to be fitter. We want to try and play harder cricket for a bit longer. You want England to try and play a bit more positive, a bit more expansively, and there'll be the cynics out there that will say to you, oh, you can't do that. I'm going to back you 100%.
Yeah.
He said, because it's absolutely the right kind of pathway for the team to go down.
So he was a good mentor, good senior player, not one of those who's worried about the places of youngsters coming in.
He was incredible. And also with the fitness, I knew he had a dodgy back.
Yeah.
And I would say, look, Gray, when we go and do those fitness sessions, I don't expect you to do what I'm going to do or any of the younger players, but just pretend you're stretching or doing something. He says, no worries. Absolutely no worries. And he was just, you know, in Pakistan, actually, one of my first tours, that great series where he was in the dark with Nasser getting the winning runs, you know, he was going through a huge amount of difficulty on that tour. And it was me and Ashley Giles that spent most evenings playing PlayStation. You know, he was Chelsea, I was Man United, Jalo was Arsenal, and we spent every night in one of our rooms just playing on a PlayStation, just trying to have a bit of fun. But you could clearly see that he was going through a huge amount of strain with what was happening back home. But great player, but, you know, you talk about great teammates. He was one of the great teammates because he brought everything into the team room, and he gave so much back. As Nasser said in his interview, he didn't say a great deal in team meetings, but he was brilliant one-on-one. one-on-one, when he had you on his own, he'd open up to you, you'd open up to him, and I always felt when I left a conversation with Graham that I'd gained something. I took something away from that conversation.
Yeah. Cookie, what impact did Graham Thorpe have on your cricket career?
Well, I'm kind of the generation kind of a little bit behind Toughness and Vaughan, that when I was growing up, I had Gucci as that first initial love of cricket. But when I really got into cricket, 12, 13-year-old left-handed batter, there was only one England cricketer that I wanted to copy. It was Graham Thorpe.
Sun hat on.
A sun hat, 3/4 length shirts. My mum wasn't very happy when I cut one of them up because I wanted to bat like Thorpe. But that was the score I looked at, and he was the one who was successful against those great bowling attacks. And I was lucky enough, actually, as a 19-year-old, after following his career, I played an MCC game with him against West Indies at Arundel. And my mum and dad loved cricket, watched a lot of our games, but never got in the way or never did it. But he took a picture of me and Thorpe batting together. He knew how much I'd watched him play, and he said, "God, I bet that was fun today, batting." And he was right at the end of his career, and obviously playing the MCC game was just a warm up for the Test matches he was about to do. But just seeing him operate and just seeing he was an England legend, and that's what I wanted to be, to play for England. He was there, we batted together, and that's almost what dreams are made of, to do it. And obviously, I wasn't privy to all the other stuff that these guys were with as a player and stuff. It was a little bit of coaching towards the end. As I kind of finished, he kind of came around. He was more with the lines, routine, and then a bit. But just again, chatting in the bar with him about cricket and about his experiences, it was unbelievable. So open about his experience as a cricketer and what he went through, how he battled, what he did was extraordinary. So I just feel very lucky in one sense that I batted with my hero, and it's obviously incredibly sad with what's happened last little bit.
How did his career end, Michael? Because you were captain, of course, 2005. He played his 100th Test. There was a lot of sort of Ian Bell conversation at the time, wasn't there? The Ashes are about to start, that incredible series. You were captain. How did that curtain come down?
Well, he'd played his 100th Test match at I think it was Durham against Bangladesh, and he'd been having injections into his back, and he knew the style of cricket that we wanted to try and play against Australia, which was very on the front foot, very energetic, very kind of in their faces in the field as well. And he kind of alluded that his bat wasn't quite up to be able to play that style of cricket. So we had to make a judgment call, and it was around that time we just fancied playing Australia with a young, fresh set of minds. We didn't want any baggage from what had happened in the 90s, early 2000s, but if Graham Thorpe had said that he was 100% fit, I guarantee he would have played that series. He was one, and I had so much admiration. And honestly, this sad kind of state that we're all kind of talking about, I just look at Toughness and all the players that played in the 80s and 90s. I have so much admiration for England players because they used to go on tour for 3 or 4 months. Phil said something on a show just the other day. He said most of his match fee or tour fee went on phone calls, just to phone home. There was no Skype. They didn't see the kids like the players can do these days. They didn't have that cushion of support from the ECB. They didn't get looked after. They didn't get the rewards financially that at the end of their career they knew they were going to be able to just have a period of just doing nothing if they want to. I just have so much admiration, and what's happened to Graham, I kind of look back and thought, I've been very, very lucky. I came into England when it was not in 1999, year after Central contract, and was absolutely protected by the England bubble. These guys back in the 80s, 90s, going back to the 70s as well, they didn't have any of that. They didn't get protected, and they were just kind of thrown out there.
The PCA, I mean, that's developed enormously, hasn't it? I mean, and that sort of that whole question of mentalness and looking after players and understanding of what the issues are that weren't in place at all.
Well, just like a simple conversation these days about mental well-being. It's a natural conversation to have. You try and have that conversation back in the 80s and 90s, you're probably going to get laughed at. That's just the different eras, and I just have so much admiration and kind of look back, and that my heroes are all those players that played in the 80s and 90s and went through those long tours, those long times without seeing loved ones. Just to think these days we can go on tour, we can just get on a phone, we can speak to our kids, we can see them.
Yes.
They didn't have any of that.
Yeah. was going to ask you one more question, Cookie, before we take it. I was only going to go on television. As a left-handed batsman, what was about the way that Graham played that you really admire?
Cutting the pull. I played as a back foot, and I just his cut, his pull, he front foot in the air. I could never quite do that, but I tried to do the front foot pull with the swivel with the front foot in the air, and the cut shot. They're basically my two scoring shots. Kind of that's what because he did, and his ability to like play spin, I think was so un-English as well. Like the sweep and the manipulated strike, he used his hands so well to hit through the thing. So, and the one little thing I'm going to mention just very quickly is how many people have come out of my generation said Thorpe was my hero. I know probably all left-handed who love playing cut and pull, but Broady, Ducky, there's so many other people.
Inspired a generation.
He did inspire my generation of like who wanted to play, and that's what a legacy that is to me.